The donghua begins by showing a young man, Yang Jinghua, who comes from a poor family and lives alone in a city. Since the first generation, the Jinghua family has devoted themselves to exorcists. Even Jinghua's grandfather received special recognition from the emperor and got an award, a nameplate, as an honor. The nameplate has always been a symbol of honor for the Jinghua family. It has always been passed on from one generation to the next. Unfortunately, after time passed and civilization changed, the degree of an exorcist was falling, and not even many people used exorcism services anymore. As a result, the Jinghua family did not have much wealth that could be passed on to Yang Jinghua. He had to live while challenging economic conditions. To survive and fulfill daily needs, Jinghua worked as a fortune teller on the city's streets daily. A rich girl came to Jinghua and asked him to predict her future soulmate. With a bit sleepy, Jinghua said the girl would overflow with so much luck that she didn't have to worry about her soulmate. The girl laughed loudly in an arrogant style after hearing that. She said she was lucky because she had a beautiful face and came from a wealthy family. Hearing the woman's arrogance, Jinghua immediately corrected his prediction and told her all her wealth would be gone. The girl directly flew into a rage. She kicked Jinghua before she drove him out of place. Elsewhere, a woman who seemed familiar with Jinghua also asked him to predict her future. But Jinghua refused because she would never have her fortune telling. She was distraught with Jinghua. In the middle of their conversation, a good-looking man drove his car into the alley, and he seemed confused, looking for someone at the place. In the afternoon, a neighbor came to his apartment when Jinghua went home from his fortune-telling job. He asked him to fix his laptop. Besides being a fortune teller, Jinghua also had a side job as an electronics repairman. Since he did not have enough money, he chose to look for computer parts at the junkyard. The night when Jinghua was collecting some tools and parts, he suddenly heard the sound of fighting around the area. When investigated, it turned out that the voice came from a handsome young man he had previously seen around the alley fighting with a young woman. When he saw the light coming out of the young man's hand, Jinghua thought they were shooting an action movie with CGI effects. The handsome young man, Duanmu, was astonished to learn that Jinghua could see the woman he was attacking. Jinghua initially thought the two were filming a movie scene and was shocked by the woman's attack. Fortunately, Duanmu managed to protect Jinghua from the attack. It made him realize that the two people in front were fighting. Jinghua asked him what magic the woman was using, and he explained that she was using the power of the demon spirit. Duanmu then asked Jinghua to leave the place immediately because it was too dangerous, and he could be dead attacked by the demon woman. But when Duanmu turned around, she had already fled, and he scolded Jinghua for causing the demon to escape. After Jinghua discovered that Duanmu was an exorcist, he introduced himself as a descendant of an exorcist family who had been respected for many years. He also said that his ancestors had been the only acclaimed exorcists in the imperial era. Jinghua was just not lucky because his parents died when he was in junior high school. Now Jinghua has to survive alone. After finishing babbling at length, Jinghua realized that Duanmu had left the place. The night when Jinghua walked home to his apartment, a large truck suddenly hit him, and he was unconscious. In the hospital, he was transformed into a handsome white young man. Jinghua thought that he had been reincarnated, but soon after, Duanmu walked over and told him that he was dead and that the person he saw today was a spirit figure. Jinghua did not believe it, but then Duanmu showed the television news that broadcasted the accident experienced by Jinghua. After watching the news on various television channels, Jinghua realized that what Duanmu had said was happening. Jinghua panicked and started acting strange by rolling on the floor. A moment later, he stopped and asked Duanmu why he became more handsome when he died. Duanmu explained that when someone dies, they will turn into a figure where they feel happiest. Hearing this, Jinghua concluded that he currently had a face when he was a junior high school teenager. At that time, his parents were still alive. Duanmu then took Jinghua away and asked him to become a shadow spirit for him. But Jinghua immediately refused and ran away from Duanmu until he almost fell from the top of the building. At that moment, Jinghua only realized that he could fly freely in the air as a spirit. Duanmu hasn't given up yet and continues to persuade him to contract as his shadow spirit. Duanmu told Jinghua that all the spirits in the world would turn into evil spirits 7 days after they died, and all the evil spirits would be sentenced by the gods. Jinghua still didn't care about it and immediately sunk his head into the hospital wall. At that moment, Jinghua saw the spirit of a little purple-eyed girl so terrifying that he immediately ran and hugged Duanmu. But when Jinghua realized that it was the spirit of a cute little girl, Jinghua calmed down and patted the little girl's head. Strangely, the little girl suddenly turned into a woman with such enormous demonic power that she threw Jinghua hard. It turned out that the little girl was the devil woman Jinghua had seen before at the junkyard. The demon woman then asked Duanmu to hand over his spiritual power, or she would take Jinghua hostage and turn him into an evil spirit. Duanmu tried to bring out the attack on the woman, but she succeeded in thwarting the attack. The demon woman forced him to give up his spiritual power tomorrow night, or she would completely turn Jinghua into an evil spirit, and Duanmu must kill him. After threatening Donghua, the demon woman took Donghua to the middle of the forest so that the evil spirits there could eat Jinghua's spirit. She then told Donghua that she intentionally held Donghua hostage to force Donghua to give up his extraordinary spiritual power. The woman planned to use Donghwa's spiritual power to reincarnate and become the most influential figure in the spirit world. Donghua, terrified, immediately ran away while shouting for help to others. Shortly after, Donghua came to Donghua and gave him a gold seal ring to prevent Donghua from becoming an evil spirit. If Donghua was willing to wear the ring, it meant Donghua had entered into a contract to become Donghwa's shadow spirit. When Donghua almost put the ring on Jinghua's finger, he suddenly realized something and immediately beat Donghua with a hard blow. It turned out that Donghua in front of Donghua was not the real Donghua but a demon woman disguised as Donghua. Realizing that her cover had been blown, the demon woman instantly gathered all the evil spirits from the forest and used them to attack Donghua. Donghua moved quickly and avoided the evil spirit attack. In the middle of the fight, Donghua threw a sealing ring at the real Donghua and asked him to wear it so that Donghua could be his shadow spirit. At first, Donghua still refused to enter into the contract. Still, after he learned that Donghua would kill him when he turned into an evil spirit, Donghua became afraid and followed Donghwa's orders. After Donghua succeeded in wearing the sealing ring, all the evil spirit forces that covered up his body were immediately destroyed. Donghua got spiritual power from the ring and used it to kill all the evil spirits on the mountain. The demon woman had also been freed from the influence of the forces of evil spirits and returned to being an ordinary human spirit. The woman's spirit also begged Donghua not to kill her and give her forgiveness, but Donghua refused and immediately killed the woman's spirit. Seeing that Donghua got rid of the woman's spirit, Donghua felt sorry because he thought of her as an ordinary woman's spirit. But he finally understood after Donghua told Donghua that the woman was a psychopathic woman who had killed many people. After that, Donghua got a call from someone and immediately took Donghua to the airport to do Jinghua's first job as a shadow spirit. Donghua invited Donghua to pick up his fiancée, Qin Xiao, who had just returned from overseas. Even though Xiao was a beautiful and gentle girl, Donghwa's attitude to Xiao was still very stiff and cold. That night, after Donghua drove Xiao to the nearest hotel to rest, Donghua asked Donghua to go to Xiao's room and told her there would be a welcoming party tomorrow. Donghua seemed upset because Donghua kept ruling him as freely as if he were Donghwa's personal assistant. Donghua hurried away after Xiao, while Donghua went to the parking lot around the hotel. Upon arriving in Xiao's room, Donghua seemed surprised to see Xiao's slightly changed appearance because she was no longer wearing makeup. She also seemed surprised by Jinghua's sudden arrival and immediately beat him up because he had already seen her lousy appearance. Seeing that Xiao was lame at playing video games, Donghua decided to help her quickly level up. On the other hand, Donghua was cleaning up evil spirits with his spiritual powers around the hotel. While Xiao and Donghua were talking in Xiao's room, an evil spirit suddenly appeared and attacked them. Donghua, aware of that, rushed to Xiao's room and asked them to open it immediately. But Xiao stopped Donghua because she still hadn't put on makeup and didn't want Donghua to see her normal appearance. In the end, when Donghua managed to break through the door, Donghua discovered that Xiao and Donghua were no longer in the room. It turned out Donghua and Xiao were trapped in the spirit world, so Donghua couldn't find them both. Xiao asked Donghua to use his shadow spirit power to destroy the trap, but Donghua admitted that he still didn't know anything about his power. Shortly, a group of evil spirits began to cover up the place and seized Xiao's mind to kill Donghua. The evil spirit had incited Xiao to say that Donghua prioritized Donghua over Xiao. Xiao, who had been affected, immediately strangled Jinghua's neck and intended to kill him so that Donghua could love her completely. At that time, Donghua saw memories of Xiao's past that Donghua had always ignored, and even those around her considered her unworthy of being Donghwa's fiancée. Soon after, Donghua suddenly came out of the spirit world after Donghua managed to pull his body. Donghua immediately scolded Donghua for never appreciating Xiao's feelings and treating her properly. Xiao suddenly attacked them in the middle of the debate until they crashed onto the floor. Donghua asked Donghua to use the power of the sealing ring and imagine a weapon against the demons. Donghua followed Donghua. Shortly, a light sword came out of Jinghua's hand. Donghua immediately helped Donghua to get rid of the evil spirit that ruled Xiao's body, and they managed to save her. After the incident, Donghua decided to take Xiao and Donghua to live in his house so he could always protect them. That night, as their car drove towards the area around the mountains, Donghua thought that Donghua was just a fake rich man who couldn't afford a house in the city center. Xiao disputed the words and told Donghua that all the land in the mountainous area belonged to him. Donghua also seemed surprised after knowing how much wealth the Donghua family had. Upon arrival at the magnificent Donghwa's house, the servants prepared to welcome Donghua and the new shadow spirit. Donghua watched as many servants came to greet Donghua and give their best service to him. But a young man in the house didn't seem to like seeing Donghua coming. He is Sidhu, Donghwa's cousin. Two of the Donghua brothers, Siyun and Siming, also came to see the person who would be Donghwa's shadow spirit. Afterward, everyone gathered in the dining room for dinner and various exquisite delicacies. Duanmu's grandmother felt delighted to see Xiao's presence and began to inquire about the new shadow spirit that Duanmu had recruited. Jinghua introduced himself to her but felt very awkward about the situation. While crying happily, Duanmu's grandmother said she felt grateful that Duanmu had found a new shadow spirit after his parents died a few years ago. She welcomed Jinghua warmly and asked him to treat the house like his own. The night when Jinghua was walking around with Xiao, he felt envious because Duanmu had a fortunate fate. Xiao then told Jinghua that Duanmu was the head of the Tanmoku noble family, so he often received special treatment. She also mentioned that Duanmu had a very close relationship with the gods and abundant wealth. In the middle of the night, when everyone was about to rest, Jinghua was upset that Duanmu didn't provide a bed in his room. Duanmu explained that a spirit like him did not need sleep and ordered Jinghua to walk out when he felt bored. At the same time, a little green-haired girl secretly observed the interaction between Duanmu and Jinghua. Jinghua, who got bored, tried to leave the roof of Duanmu's house, but the house was given a magic barrier, so he couldn't go anywhere. But shortly after Jinghua lay on the roof, a little girl, Yin Huayi, appeared and attacked him with a young man, Yin Zhou. They purposely came to that place to find out how much power Duanmu's shadow spirit had. But when they saw him, they felt disappointed because the new Duanmu's shadow spirit was frail and knew nothing. Yinze asked Yin to teach Jinghua a lesson with the green umbrella weapon she always carried. She advanced forward and hit Jinghua's vital parts with the umbrella repeatedly until he screamed in agony. Yinze again insulted Jinghua's ability, and it made Jinghua feel challenged to fight with him. Jinghua took out his light sword and directed it towards Yin until the green crown above Yin's head was split. Yin, who was very upset, immediately turned into a lovely adult woman who intended to kill Jinghua. But Yinze had attacked Jinghua first and told Jinghua that he was a former shadow spirit of someone named Tanmoku Ki who ruled the Yura Mountains. Jinghua tried to attack Yinze with his light sword, but the attack could easily be stopped. When Yinze intended to bite Jinghua's neck, Duanmu suddenly appeared and immediately stopped Yinze. Duanmu warned Yinze not to bother Jinghua anymore, but Yinze still underestimated him and forced Duanmu to be rude to him. Yinze then said it should be the shadow spirit tasked with protecting an exorcist and not the other way around. Duanmu asked Yinze not to interfere in Jinghua's affairs and then walked away. After the incident, Duanmu and Jinghua got into a debate because of Duanmu's pompous and arrogant attitude. Jinghua reminded Duanmu that many evil spirits were targeting Duanmu's spiritual power, but he was also a spirit who could take Duanmu's power. Jinghua could have seized and used it to reincarnate into a wealthy person in the next life. Duanmu doubted that because Jinghua could only seize his power if Jinghua had defeated him first. Jinghua said that even though Duanmu looked perfect, he would find Duanmu's weakness one day. Duanmu leisurely told him that by the time they entered into a contract, Jinghua would know some information about him, including his birth date, that could be used to torture him. But Duanmu then told him that if someone hurt him, then Jinghua would also disappear with him. The following day when Xiao was about to give Duanmu breakfast, she saw Jinghua's position very close to Duanmu. Hence, she immediately ran after Jinghua while accusing him of being a pervert. Jinghua ran as fast as he could to avoid Xiao's chase and accidentally fell on a tree branch. At the same time, Duanmu's bodyguard passed by the place carrying a sword. Jinghua, curious, immediately asked about the sword and finally found out that it was a legendary sword passed down by the Tanmoku family. The guard wanted to bring the heirloom sword to a temple and perform a ritual ceremony using it. The sword belonged to an exorcist, Tanmoku Rakugetsu, who was the first generation of the Tanmoku family. Rakugetsu used to take the heirloom sword to kill demons and protect the world from the influence of evil spirits. Shortly after, Sidhu volunteered to bring the Rakugetsu sword to the Tanmoku family temple. After placing the sword on the temple offering table, Sidhu asked Jinghua to leave Duanmu. Sidhu thought Duanmu was evil, and Jinghua immediately agreed with his opinion. Jinghua said he had lousy luck after meeting Duanmu and couldn't enjoy pork because Duanmu was a vegetarian. Sidhu talked about his hatred for Duanmu because he was constantly compared to Duanmu's very tall and handsome appearance. Sidhu and Jinghua felt related to each other and intended to destroy Duanmu. Sidhu asked him to tell Duanmu's birth date so he could torture Duanmu, but Jinghua refused to disclose it because even though he hated Duanmu so much, he didn't want to kill or hurt him. Hearing the rejection, Sidhu immediately pulled out his knife and attacked him repeatedly until he finally told Sidhu that Duanmu's birthday was February 30th. After hearing that, Sidhu initially felt happy and immediately released Jinghua so he could record the date. But when he realized that Jinghua had deceived him, he instantly entangled Jinghua with the evil spirit's power. Jinghua seemed surprised after learning that Sidhu had an extraordinary power to control evil spirits. Sidhu instantly hit Jinghua and stabbed Jinghua's body repeatedly until he was willing to tell Duanmu's birthday. Jinghua tried to resist by attacking Sidhu with a light sword, but he could still escape and pierce Jinghua's body with his knife. Feeling cornered, Jinghua tried to grab Rakugetsu's sword and intended to hit Sidhu's body with it. Jinghua seemed to be influenced by certain evil spirits, but the situation did not last long because Jinghua regained consciousness and unleashed the sword. When Sidhu was about to point his knife at Jinghua's body, Duanmu suddenly appeared and stopped him. As a result, the knife also hit Duanmu's hand, making it bleed. Duanmu warned Sidhu not to disturb his shadow spirit anymore, or Sidhu would deal with him. Shortly after, Shio appeared at the place and immediately shouted hysterically as he saw the wound on Duanmu's hand. The servants immediately treated the wound on Duanmu's hand with a bandage, and the personal bodyguard of Duanmu's family, Sidhu's father, immediately apologized to Duanmu. Duanmu said it didn't matter, but he asked Sidhu and his father to leave his house. The next day, Duanmu took Jinghua to the temple to perform a special ritual ceremony. Upon arriving, all the servants and members of the Tanmoku family welcomed them. Before the ceremony started, Duanmu changed clothes and put a unique hairband on Jinghua. Duanmu told him that the ceremony this time was a meaningful ceremony for an exorcist, and he wanted Jinghua to keep the unique hairband during the ceremony. Duanmu explained that the hairband was made of his hair, connecting the two souls. After a servant told him that the preparations had been completed, Duanmu said that through the ceremony, everyone would know that Jinghua was the shadow spirit of the Tanmoku family. In front of the temple court, Jinghua and Shio sat among the audience with Duanmu's grandmother and Tanmoku's other family. In the middle of the ceremony, Sidhu's father and a woman, Yongning, intended to attend the ceremony, but a guard stopped them. But a moment later, Siyun asked the bodyguard to let them enter the temple. Soon after, Duanmu began to carry out the ritual process in the center of the temple and stabbed his sword on the altar until a light flashed out into the sky. Yongning, in the audience, tried to break Duanmu's concentration by bringing up the problems that afflict Sidhu. Xiao and Jinghua immediately stood up and defended Duanmu by saying that it was Sidhu who had started the chaos in the temple the other day. Shortly after, Duanmu called Jinghua to come to the altar and kneel before finally, Duanmu handed Rakugetsu's sword to him. After Jinghua received Rakugetsu's sword, Duanmu united his head with Jinghua's head and said that Jinghua had officially become his shadow spirit. When Yongning saw Jinghua's spiritual power merging with Duanmu's, she was upset that Duanmu handed over Rakugetsu's sword to a weak man like Jinghua. Yongning then approached Duanmu's grandmother to protest, but Duanmu's grandmother immediately defended Jinghua by saying that whoever interfered with Jinghua meant the same as doubting the Tanmoku family's choice. Seeing Duanmu's cold grandmother's reaction, Yongning panicked and apologized for what Sidhu did. At the same time, Siyun left the courtyard and intended to find out information about Jinghua's background. The next day, Tanmoku's private secretary Tamaguchi came to Duanmu's room and gave him breakfast. But since Duanmu was still fast asleep, Jinghua helped Tamaguchi wake Duanmu by shouting loudly in his ear. As a result, Duanmu woke up in shock and immediately kicked Jinghua until he was thrown hard. After finishing cleansing, Duanmu enjoyed the breakfast prepared by the servants in the dining room. Feeling tempted by the delicious food on the dining table, Jinghua asked Duanmu to feed him some food. At that moment, Tamaguchi was astonished because he finally saw Duanmu smiling. Feeling unsatisfied, Jinghua asked Duanmu to provide him another meal, but Duanmu refused, and it made Jinghua feel very upset. Jinghua was frustrated because, as a spirit, he couldn't touch anything. He needed help to take the delicious food directly. After breakfast, Duanmu attended the Tanmoku family meeting with Siyun, but Duanmu fell asleep during the session. After it was over, Duanmu rushed to his room and fell asleep as usual. The next day, Duanmu took Jinghua to his high school, where all the girls seemed fascinated by Duanmu's good looks. Upon arriving in class, Duanmu sat in the rearmost row and fell asleep during the lesson. The teacher was fed up with Duanmu's careless attitude and told him to answer the question in front of the class. Duanmu leisurely walked to the front of the class and completed the most straightforward questions on the whiteboard. In the afternoon, Duanmu relaxed in a garden and leaned under a tree while closing his eyes. Seeing Duanmu's way of life, Jinghua mocked him as an old man who had just retired. Jinghua was convinced that Duanmu would grow into a big-mouthed old man if he lived such a way of life. But Tamaguchi immediately broke that notion and said that an exorcist like Duanmu would never grow old. On the way home, Jinghua fell asleep in the car and saw two young men, Rakugetsu and Shisei. After waking up, Jinghua realized that Duanmu had driven him to his previous residential address. Duanmu wanted Jinghua to take things that he felt were necessary to bring with him. On the other hand, Siyun had received a report on Jinghua's background information from Siming, but she had not found anything special about him. Siming then said that when Jinghua had an accident, Duanmu happened to be conducting an exorcism process in the area. Duanmu also saw the accident experienced by Jinghua, so he contacted the police and ambulance to deal with the accident. Hearing this, Siyun thought that Duanmu might have had an involvement with Jinghua's accident. The scene goes back to Duanmu and Jinghua, who have arrived at Jinghua's old apartment to check Jinghua's belongings. Duanmu asked Jinghua if there was anything Jinghua wanted to take away, but Jinghua felt that there wasn't anything valuable enough for him to be brought. After that, Duanmu went to the front of the apartment building, where a man and a woman were burning their money to commemorate Jinghua's death. They talked about Jinghua's kindness and felt sorry for the fate of Jinghua, who had to die at a very young age. Shortly after, several people who used to collect security money in the area suddenly approached them and beat them up. Jinghua was eager to help the man, but as a spirit, he could not touch anything. Duanmu immediately pulled up Jinghua and kissed him so he could touch anything. Jinghua used the opportunity to beat those gangsters collecting security money with a few kicks. The gangsters felt strange because they could not see the person who kicked them. They also decided to run away because they thought the person who kicked them was a ghost. A few days later, Duanmu again met with the gangsters who used to collect security money and were about to attack Duanmu with a knife. But before they could attack, the gangsters' boss got a call from their leader telling them that the person in front of them was a member of the Tanmoku family. Hearing that, the gangsters' boss immediately beat up his men and gave the cell phone to Duanmu. He apologized to Duanmu and promised to teach his men a lesson. On the other hand, the man and woman who previously commemorated Jinghua's death ceremony were seen cleaning Jinghua's apartment. At first, the woman intended to pay the apartment rent that had yet to be paid by Jinghua. The man replied that the debt had been paid by someone who claimed to be Jinghua's family. She felt relieved after learning that Jinghua did not live alone and still had a family that could help him. On the other hand, Duanmu, who had just left Jinghua's apartment, finally returned to the car while carrying Jinghua's family nameplate. While accepting it, Jinghua recounted that he was the last descendant of the You Exorcist family. Hearing that, Duanmu told Jinghua that he had the same fate where they no longer had parents. Jinghua then said he felt a little grateful because he didn't die before his parents died. Jinghua considered that the abandoned person would feel more grief than the left person. Hearing Jinghua's words, Duanmu felt sorry and promised he would consider him his family. On their way to Duanmu's house, Jinghua dreamed again where he saw Rakugetsu and Shisei, who looked very familiar. But one day, Shisei saw Rakugetsu, who had slaughtered many people so brutally that Shisei decided to kill Rakugetsu with his own hands. The incident made Jinghua look so shocked that Jinghua finally woke up from his dream and found that his hands were covered in blood. It turned out that Jinghua had unconsciously used Rakugetsu's sword to stab Duanmu, so the car Duanmu was driving was out of control and crashed into a tree. On the other hand, Seeming got additional information about Jinghua and told him that Jinghua was descended from Shisei, the man who had killed Rakugetsu, the first-generation exorcist of the Tanmoku family. The scene turns to Duanmu, who received medical treatment from the Tanmoku family's physician. Because of Duanmu's highly critical condition, Seeming ordered the housekeepers to prepare for the healing ceremony at the Tanmoku family temple. Upon their arrival, Siyun was about to punish Jinghua for making Duanmu wretched, but Seeming immediately stopped the action. Seeming then led the ceremony of Duanmu's healing ritual with the servants who sat circularly around Duanmu. While the ritual was going on, Jinghua was locked up in a magic shield and couldn't go anywhere. Siyun said that as an exorcist, Duanmu should not accept blood transfusions from others. Therefore, when Duanmu was seriously injured, Xiao had to channel her life energy to Duanmu so that he could recover. After the healing ritual was complete, Xiao approached Jinghua and told him that Duanmu's grandmother was sick after hearing about Duanmu's accident. And as long as they were ill, Siyun will be appointed head of the Tanmoku family. In the middle of the conversation, a man walked over to Jinghua and Xiao and gave them a set of clothes that had Duanmu's spiritual power. Xiao said she could destroy the protective magic that locked Jinghua up, but he had to be willing to stab Rakugetsu's sword into his chest. To see Duanmu's condition, Jinghua immediately obeyed her words and pointed Rakugetsu's sword at his chest. As a result, the magic barrier surrounding Jinghua immediately broke, and Jinghua could be freed from the cage. While wearing the set of spiritual clothes the previous servant gave him, Jinghua walked over to Duanmu in his room. Shortly after, Yinzei suddenly appeared in Duanmu's room and intended to kidnap Duanmu, who was still weak. Jinghua immediately pulled out his sword towards Yinzei and asked him to leave, but Yinzei could quickly slam Jinghua and confine him into his demon box. At the same time, Duanmu woke up and asked Yinzei to remove Jinghua from the demon cage immediately. But Yinzei could quickly slam Duanmu, who was still not fully recovered from Rakugetsu's sword stab wound. Yinzei then ordered Yin and a woman, Rogoku, to test Jinghua's power in the demon cage. Jinghua tried to point his sword towards Yin, but Rogoku had first slashed Jinghua's hand very quickly. Rogoku told Jinghua that she was the embodiment of the demon sword that Yinzei had, and she wanted Jinghua to cancel the shadow spirit contract with Duanmu. But since Jinghua refused, Rogoku beat him repeatedly until Jinghua was hurt badly. Shortly after, Yinzei got into the demon cage and stepped on Jinghua's body, making it difficult for Jinghua to move. Yinzei said that the shadow spirit agreement between Jinghua and Duanmu was one-sided, in which Jinghua would disappear when Duanmu was killed. But Jinghua insisted on maintaining his bond with Duanmu, so Yinzei became upset and immediately stabbed Jinghua in the chest. Yinzei's actions created tremendous pain in his body, and Jinghua was helplessly exposed to the ground. Fortunately, Jinghua managed to grab Rakugetsu's sword and obtain an incredibly great spiritual power from it. Yinzei was struck by Jinghua, who had turned into a swordsman with the same strength as Shisei. When Jinghua slashed one of Yinzei's hands with a single release, Yinzei began to realize that Duanmu chose Jinghua as a shadow spirit because Jinghua was descended from Shisei. He knew he would not win against Jinghua, so he admitted his defeat to Jinghua. Before Yinzei and his troops left, he gave Jinghua a special ingredient that could help Duanmu's healing process. Yinzei advised that a Tanmoku family was about to carry out an uprising, so Yinzei wanted Jinghua to protect Duanmu from the traitors. After Yinzei and his troops left, Jinghua gave the potion to Duanmu, and moments later, he regained consciousness. Duanmu then asked Jinghua to take Rakugetsu's sword and come with him somewhere. Meanwhile, Suyun and Seeming learned that Duanmu had regained consciousness and left with Jinghua temple to see Duanmu's blind teacher for help, but the requirement to be able to ask for help was to give something valuable or beat him in a fight. Duanmu immediately attacked his teacher using Rakugetsu's sword, but his teacher still could defeat him. Duanmu's teacher realized that Duanmu had attacked him in an injured state, so he asked him to hand over a valuable object instead of fighting with him. But since Duanmu didn't have anything worthwhile, he preferred to fight back against him. After several attacks toward the front, Duanmu finally drew his sword toward his teacher and won the match. Unfortunately, shortly after the fight, Duanmu suddenly fell unconscious from running out of power. A while after Duanmu awoke, Duanmu's teacher asked what help he wanted to ask for. Duanmu told him that the spiritual power had been sealed inside Rakugetsu's sword, and he tried to remove the seal. Hearing that, his teacher said the way to remove the seal was to remove the soul from Duanmu's shadow spirit. Duanmu asked if there was any way to get rid of Jinghua, but his teacher was very stingy and wanted him to hand over something valuable before asking again. But Duanmu refused because all the valuables he had belonged to the Tanmoku family. After that, his teacher went to see Jinghua, who had been waiting outside the room for a while. He handed him Rakugetsu's sword. Duanmu's teacher said that he would consider Duanmu winning the match if Jinghua could beat him. Jinghua prepared to fight him and transformed into a swordsman. Not long after, the teacher came to Duanmu's room and immediately prevented him from getting out of bed. He said that Jinghua had enormous power, but it seemed like Jinghua himself was still unaware of that. When Jinghua came to Duanmu's room with Shisei's appearance, Duanmu seemed surprised because he had never seen Jinghua like that. The teacher then went out of Duanmu's room and said that Jinghua had defeated him in the previous fight. Therefore, before he left, he told Duanmu that another way to unseal Duanmu's spiritual power was to put Rakugetsu's sword into the sheath of the original Rakugetsu sword. After hearing that, Jinghua finally found out about Duanmu's spiritual power trapped in Rakugetsu's sword. Duanmu explained that a sword was deliberately created by a Shisei swordsman to punish Rakugetsu because he had slaughtered many innocent people, and only an actual descendant like Jinghua can use the power of the Rakugetsu sword. Duanmu and Jinghua planned to look for the real sword sheath around Jinghua's house, but Jinghua felt that he had never seen such an object in his apartment. The night when Duanmu and Jinghua were about to return to Duanmu's house, Sidhu suddenly appeared and stopped their car. He then blew up the car they were driving and attacked them both. Luckily, Jinghua managed to drag Duanmu out of the car before it exploded and took him into the woods. But Sidhu still hadn't given up and insisted on taking them both out. So Jinghua had to fight against Sidhu to protect Duanmu, who was still weak. Sidhu attacked Jinghua with the power of evil spirits and deliberately moved away from Jinghua to blow up the area around him. But when the blast smoke disappeared, Sidhu just realized that Jinghua and Duanmu had gone from the place and hid behind a tree. Duanmu gave some sealing papers to Jinghua to enable him to set up traps around them. As a result, after Sidhu was lured into the trap area, he was trapped in the seal, and Duanmu had a chance to escape with Jinghua. Unfortunately, Duanmu's physical condition deteriorated because his spiritual power was still sealed in Rakugetsu's sword. Jinghua asked him if there was any other way to open the seal, but Duanmu refused to tell him. Jinghua thought the seal could only disappear if he disappeared, so Jinghua kept blaming himself. Duanmu immediately scolded him and said that none of this was his fault. Duanmu asked him to leave and save himself, but Jinghua refused because he would die if Duanmu died. Duanmu said that it was just a lie because he would stay alive as long as he had Duanmu's hairband, which would be the source of life for Jinghua. After that, Duanmu kissed the sealing ring on Jinghua's finger and released Jinghua's shadow spirit contract so he could escape. When Sidhu found their whereabouts, Duanmu immediately pasted the sealing paper onto Jinghua's face and made him teleport elsewhere. At that moment, Jinghua met Yinzei on the other side of the forest and asked him to help save Duanmu. But since he could not leave the Yura mountain range, he told Jinghua to use the spiritual power of Rakugetsu's sword so Jinghua could return to Duanmu's place. Upon arriving, Jinghua transformed into Shisei and directly attacked Sidhu with Rakugetsu's sword. Even though Duanmu struggled to move, he helped Jinghua when trapped in Sidhu's evil spirit. Jinghua then drew a sword towards Sidhu and asked why he hated Duanmu so much. Sidhu said that Duanmu had killed two people who were very valuable to him, but Jinghua did not believe that. Unfortunately, Sidhu used the opportunity to take Jinghua's hairband and intended to cut it, but the effort was thwarted by Donghua even though he had to be severely injured in the attack. As the situation became more precarious, Jinghua suddenly rose and cut the hairline with Rakugetsu's sword. As a result, Jinghua's source of life slowly began to dim, and Donghua managed to regain his spiritual power. Before Jinghua disappeared into the light, Jinghua asked Donghua to continue to be an exorcist and eradicate evil spirits in this world. Strangely enough, just after Jinghua burst into a very bright blue light, Jinghua suddenly came back to life with an unusually great spiritual power. Jinghua then lifted Sidhu's body and intended to kill him by strangling his neck without touching it. Donghua realized that Jinghua was being possessed by Rakugetsu's soul, so he tried to reawaken Jinghua. But Jinghua could quickly slam Donghua and then attack him back. Rakugetsu's soul, which was in Jinghua's body, said that by this time, Jinghua's soul had been destroyed and would never return. Rakugetsu threw Donghwa's body to the ground and returned to Sidhu to kill him. Sidhu tried to resist by attacking Rakugetsu using his evil spirit, but Rakugetsu immediately fought him back so that Sidhu was hurt by his own attack. At the same time, Donghua suddenly rose and stabbed Rakugetsu from behind using Rakugetsu's sword. At first, Rakugetsu laughed at him and said he didn't feel any pain, but then Donghua slashed his palm and pulled the sword from Rakugetsu's body. At that moment, a bright light emanated from Jinghua's body, and Rakugetsu disappeared from Jinghua's body. Donghua tried to heal Jinghua's body wound, but Sidhu suddenly appeared behind Donghua and attacked him using his evil spirit power. Fortunately, Jinghua rose again with Rakugetsu's spiritual power and instantly saved Donghua from the roar of the evil spirit. Then, Jinghua attacked Sidhu repeatedly, and the fierce battle between them returned. After a long intense fight, Jinghua defeated and slashed Sidhu at dawn. Jinghua then threw Sidhu's body in front of the Tanmoku family's house, where everyone was fighting for the position of leader of the Tanmoku family. That means there was a traitor in the Tanmoku family who sent Sidhu to kill Donghua so they could take power in the Tanmoku family. Sidhu planned to take over the position of Tanmoku's family leader if Donghua did not return that morning. But Jinghua had managed to bring Donghua home on time and told everyone that he would finish off anyone who dared to oppose him. Donghua then told Jinghua to quickly find Rakugetsu's sword sheath while he would take care of the matter by himself. Donghua told Jinghua that it was likely that the You family nameplate was an actual Rakugetsu's sword sheath, so he rushed to look for the nameplate. After finding it in Donghwa's room, Jinghua struggled to fit the Rakugetsu sword into the nameplate. On the other hand, Sidhu forced Donghua to remove the evil spirit in front of their house as proof that Donghua deserved to be the leader of the Tanmoku family. While trying to help Donghua up, Shio said that currently, Donghua was so severely hurt that he could not purify the evil spirit alone. But Sidhu did not care about Donghwa's condition and said that it was already part of Donghwa's task as an exorcist. If Donghua could not cleanse the evil spirit, he was considered unfit to lead the Tanmoku family. The scene switches to Jinghua, who had managed to unite the Rakugetsu sword with his sword sheath after he had done so many things. At the same time, the evil spirit in front of Donghua grew and transformed into a giant demon. Sidhu then created a magic barrier to protect herself and Donghua, who was still weak. Yangning approached Donghua with a hand fan and said she would overcome the evil spirit if he wanted to relinquish the Tanmoku family leader's position. Not long after, Jinghua came to the place carrying Rakugetsu's sword sheath and immediately cut off Yangning's hand fan. After Jinghua put in Rakugetsu's sword, Donghua regained his spiritual power. Donghua then crushed the evil spirit with a single attack and made Yangning kneel in fear. She tried to ask him for forgiveness, but his grandmother refused her apology and punished Sidhu's entire family. After the incident, Donghua returned to his routine as the leader of the Tanmoku family, and Sidhu was still obsessed with becoming an exorcist. That day when Jinghua was playing video games with Shio, Donghua visited his parents' grave to tell Jinghua's figure. In front of his parents' tomb, Donghua expressed his concerns that one day, Jinghua would find out about his past and would never forgive him. The donghua ends with the appearance of Rakugetsu's spirit, who stands with Shisei's spirit in the mountains at the end of the city. When Shisei suddenly disappeared, Rakugetsu opened his bandage and showed that one of his eyes had also disappeared. The moral value that can be learned is never to betray those who have helped us. Try not to be greedy for the power of others.